She was a billionaire with a will of iron, accustomed to commanding boardrooms and silencing entire halls with a single glance. But nothing in her world had prepared her for what she saw on that overcast morning, standing before her son's grave, because there another woman was weeping, and in her arms a little boy was calling out for his daddy. And in that instant, everything she thought she knew about the past began to shatter. Eleanor just wanted one more day of silence among the flowers and memories, until she saw a stranger kneeling at the tomb of Arthur, her son. The woman was cradling a small, red-haired boy in her arms, and the child, with his tiny hands, was placing a drawing on the grave, the word Daddy scrawled in crooked letters. It was a secret Eleanor had never imagined, but one that was now staring back at her with a child's eyes. A story about loss, silence, and the kind of love that refuses to die. And on that morning, in the cold mountain mist, the truth began to whisper her name. The fog rolled slowly down the mountainside as Eleanor Sinclair passed through the iron gates of the old cemetery, just as she had every Tuesday since the accident. Her shoulders were draped in a grey wool coat, her steps marking the damp earth as she walked toward the mausoleum where Arthur rested. In her hand, she held an arrangement of white lilies, his favorite. In her chest, the same silence that had consumed her since that damn night the helicopter vanished from the radar. But on this day, something was different. Still about 20 yards from the tomb, Eleanor stopped. She narrowed her eyes. Someone was kneeling before the dark marble headstone. A young woman, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, was whispering something to the baby she held. The little boy, a redhead, couldn't have been more than 4. He was clutching a piece of paper colored with worn-down wax crayons. Eleanor approached slowly, silently, her heart beginning to pound for no apparent reason. And then she saw it. On the paper, a child's drawing, a house, a yellow sun in the corner, and 2 figures holding hands. Above them, the shaky words, "I miss you, Daddy," signed Ben. Time stood still. Eleanor instinctively stepped back, hiding behind one of the stone angel sculptures. She watched, unable to comprehend. The woman kissed the boy's forehead, and he pointed to the tomb with shining eyes. "That's where Daddy's sleeping, right?" the child said sweetly. "Mommy said he dreams about us." Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Daddy? Was this a mistake? A fantasy? Or a truth that had been cruelly hidden? But who was this woman? And why had Arthur never told her anything about them? Eleanor Sinclair learned early on that showing weakness was a luxury women like her could not afford. The only daughter of one of America's first tech pioneers, she grew up surrounded by board meetings and silent breakfasts in mansions with more glass than warmth. By 28, she was running her own company. By 40, she had tripled her father's empire. She led with surgical precision, spoke little, heard everything, and never in any room did anyone dare to question her decisions. But no one knew what it was like for her when she went home. The mansion, nestled high in the Berkshires, was as silent as a sanctuary. Since the death of her only son, Arthur, the long hallways seemed to echo only her footsteps. No laughter, no piano playing, no smell of baking from the kitchen like there used to be. Just silence, marble, and too many flowers that died before their time. Arthur was 26 when the helicopter went down on a short trip to Boston. He was the obvious successor, the brilliant innovator, the young idealist who dreamed of a world less cold than the one he grew up in. Eleanor admired him, even if she never said it in so many words. But she also pushed him. She wanted him to be strong, unbeatable. She didn't want him to make her same mistakes, but now it was too late. Since the accident, Eleanor had created a rigid routine, work until dusk, solitary dinners, and every Tuesday, without fail, a visit to Arthur's grave. It was there, before the cold stone, that she would murmur the words she never had the courage to say in his lifetime. "I'm sorry. I miss you. You were better than I deserved." She thought she had known every kind of pain. Until that day. Because the woman before the tomb was a stranger, and that little boy, That boy had the same look in his eyes that Arthur had at 4. Restless, sweet, curious. Eleanor was still hidden, unsure of what to do. When the woman picked up the drawing, kissed it, and placed it carefully on the headstone, then she rose slowly, adjusted the baby in her arms, and walked toward the exit. Eleanor didn't move. The only thing she could do was repeat the same question in silence. Who was that woman? And what else did she not know about her own son? Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She went to bed early, but her eyes wouldn't close. The image of that little boy, red-haired, small, smiling, replayed like a silent film she couldn't pause. In her mind, a persistent echo, "Daddy." And then, "Mommy said he dreams about us." She spent hours in silence, sitting in the leather armchair in her study, staring at the framed photograph of Arthur on the mantel. His smile, always restrained, always kind. So different from the world she had raised him in. Something inside her no longer fit. In the last months of his life, Arthur had seemed different. Distracted, quiet. He would come home late, avoid board meetings, and talk about social projects she considered a waste of time. When she confronted him, he would just smile and say, "Not everything is about profit, Mom. Maybe she should have listened more. Maybe she should have asked less about numbers and more about feelings." But now it was too late. Or was it? In that endless dawn, Eleanor asked herself a question she had never dared to formulate before. Did I truly know my son? She had photos, diplomas, memories of lavish birthday parties, flawless report cards. But did she really know who he loved? What made him happy? What were his fears? His secret dreams? The answer hurt like a slow-motion gunshot. No. What she knew was what she had projected onto him. She had wanted to shape him into the perfect heir, the admired genius, the ideal man. But perhaps in doing so, she had pushed away the most human part of Arthur, the part that needed to make mistakes, to love, to hide, to live, without being watched. Eleanor then faced her most intimate pain, the fear that she hadn't been a good mother. That was it. What was eating her up inside wasn't just grief. It was guilt. And now, with this child appearing out of nowhere, with a crayon drawing and the word Daddy marked in red wax, she felt that maybe she still had a chance. Not to fix the past, but to discover what truly existed, to get to know the side of her son he had never shown her, to fill the hole in her chest with truths, no matter how difficult they were, because if that child was really Arthur's son, if that look in his eyes was more than a coincidence, then a piece of her son was still alive, breathing, talking, growing, and she couldn't ignore that. The next morning, Eleanor called her private driver and asked to be taken back to the cemetery. It wasn't Tuesday, but something inside her told her they would be back. That woman, that boy. There was a frequency to their gestures, a routine. She arrived early and hid among the cypress trees, watching from a distance. And there, in silence, she made a vow to herself. If this boy is truly my grandson, I will find out, and I will protect him, even if I have to question everything I've believed in until today. This was her deepest desire. It wasn't just about discovering the truth. It was about rebuilding what was left of Arthur, and perhaps rebuilding herself as well. For 3 weeks, Eleanor Sinclair repeated the ritual. She would arrive at the cemetery early, remain hidden among the cypress trees, and watch. It was always the same scene. The woman, young, her hair simply tied back, wearing modest clothes, would walk with the boy in her arms. With each visit, a new drawing was left on the headstone, and every childish word drawn with a crayon chipped away another piece of Eleanor's armored world. Ben. The name appeared on almost every paper, and on all of them, the same gentle, almost spiritual plea. "Daddy, I'm here." The boy would play near the tomb, gathering leaves, running between the stones, and always returning to the same spot, where he would place his small hand on the cold marble, as if waiting for a response. Eleanor started to notice patterns, the way the woman looked around, how she would hastily put away the drawings if someone passed by. as if she was afraid of being recognized or judged. That's when she asked her team at the foundation to access old files from the social project they ran on the outskirts of Boston. She was discreetly searching for photos of employees, scholarship records, any clue. And there it was, Leah Miller, a scholarship recipient in Arthur's social innovation program, a part-time nanny during the project's incubation phase. Eleanor stared at Leah's picture for long minutes. The young woman's smile in the photo was open, but her eyes carried something more. Fear? Hope? It could have been just a coincidence, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. The internal conflict grew. The pain of grief was now mixed with something harder to name: anger, not at the young woman, but at herself, for perhaps pushing her son away from a love he felt he had to hide, for having been too strong of a presence and too weak of a listener. What if that boy really was her grandson? What if Leah was the woman he had loved in secret? The questions wouldn't stop. And the more she tried to rationalize, the more she felt she had lost something immense, not just Arthur's physical presence, but the chance to know him deeply. She considered sending someone to mediate the conversation, a lawyer perhaps, or an assistant. But every time she considered that option, the image of Ben holding a toy car in front of the headstone came back to her and paralyzed her, because this wasn't a lawsuit or a negotiation. This was life. This was her own blood. The following week, Eleanor made a decision. She put on a dark coat, tied her hair back, and went to the cemetery alone. She arrived earlier than usual, but didn't hide. She sat on the bench next to the grave and waited, her heart tight, her eyes fixed on the stone path. And then she saw them, the same serene figure, with the boy in her arms. Leah seemed surprised to see the woman sitting there. She stopped, hesitated. Eleanor stood up. For a moment, there was no sound in the world. The wind rustled the dry leaves. The boy looked at her with curiosity. Leah tried to step back, but Eleanor took a step forward and said, in a firm, low voice, "His name, is it Ben?" Leah took a deep breath. Her eyes filled with water. The boy clung to his mother's legs, as if he could feel the invisible weight of the scene. Eleanor looked at him with steady eyes. What she felt was no longer fear. It was urgency. "Please, I just want to understand." Leah held back her tears, like someone who has been carrying a burden for too long. And that's when she whispered, without beating around the bush, "He's Arthur's son." And there, in front of the still fresh grave, Eleanor's world broke for the second time. For a few seconds, Eleanor said nothing. Leah's words still echoed in her mind like a muffled siren. "He's Arthur's son." There was no hesitation in that voice, no attempt to soften the truth, just the raw weight of what had been said. Ben, still hugging his mother's legs, watched with curious eyes. And something in that childlike expression, a mix of sweetness and strength, dismantled Eleanor. She felt her knees weaken. She had to sit down. The stone bench next to the headstone felt harder than ever. For the first time in months, the name Arthur Sinclair, engraved on the marble, seemed cold, distant, incomplete. "Why?" Eleanor murmured. "Why did he never tell me?" Leah looked down. "Because he was afraid. Afraid of how you'd react. He thought you wouldn't accept it, that I didn't fit into his world. And he didn't want to fight with his own mother." The sincerity in those words burned. Eleanor remembered the arguments they'd had in recent years all too well. She wanted Arthur to marry someone worthy of the legacy. Someone who understood the weight of carrying the family name, of representing the brand. Not an intern, a scholarship student, a nanny. She had never said it in those exact words, but he had understood anyway. Leah continued, "I never asked for anything. I never wanted money. I just let him be here when he could. He loved Ben, and he loved me too, even if it was in secret." Eleanor looked at her, and for the first time, she truly saw her, not just a young girl, but a woman who had survived alone, with a child in her arms and a story silenced by fear. And all of it, silently, revolved around her. And then came the final blow. Ben let go of his mother, took a folded drawing from his pocket and walked to the headstone. He knelt and carefully placed the paper on the marble. Eleanor leaned in to see. It was a child's drawing of 3 people holding hands. A man with messy hair, a woman in a purple dress, and a little boy in the middle, holding a balloon. Above them, written in large, crooked letters, "Me, Daddy and Mommy, together in heaven." The pain hit with such force that Eleanor had to stand up. She stumbled for a second and took a few steps back. I need some time," she mumbled, unable to look Leah in the eye. "This is all too much." Leah just nodded. Her eyes were teary, but she maintained her posture. She knew that pain didn't belong only to the billionaire. It was hers too. It was the pain of someone who lost the love of her life and still had to hide the existence of their child. But before Eleanor could walk away, she heard something that made her freeze. "He wanted to tell you, the night he died, he was on his way to see you. He was going to tell you everything. He told me that. He had made up his mind." Eleanor stopped. The fog was beginning to cover the ground. The silence around the tomb was thick. "He was going to tell me?" "Yes," Leah replied. "He said he didn't want to live in hiding anymore, that even if it was hard, you deserved to know. And Ben deserved it too, he just ran out of time." That truth, raw and merciless, pierced Eleanor like a spear. She took a deep breath, but the air wouldn't come. Ben ran back and grabbed the hem of her coat. He looked into her eyes and said in his sweet voice, "Do you know my daddy?" Eleanor didn't answer. She just looked at the boy, and in that small face, she saw Arthur at 3 years old, the same nose, the same eyes. "Yes, I do," she whispered. "Much more than you can imagine." The next day, the news broke. Someone had taken a photo at the cemetery and posted it on a local gossip site. CEO Eleanor Sinclair seen in tears with a young mother and red-haired child at her son's grave. A secret son? Soon, larger media outlets began to investigate. Reporters showed up at the entrance of her company. Employees whispered in the hallways. The foundation received requests for clarification. Eleanor, always so private, so controlled, was now at the center of an emotional scandal. But what hurt her the most wasn't the press. It was the board of her own company. In a closed-door meeting, one of the partners questioned her coldly. "Eleanor, is this true? Arthur had a child with a scholarship student. Do you intend to acknowledge him?" She looked at every face at the table and answered firmly, "I intend to know the truth. And if it is yes, I intend to acknowledge him and protect him with everything I have." There were murmurs, uncertainty, but Eleanor didn't flinch, because in that moment, for the first time, she knew exactly what she was going to do. As she left that room, she called Leah. Her voice was steady. "I want to see you both. Tomorrow. Alone. At the same place." And this time, she had no intention of running from the truth. The house was completely silent. Not the comfortable silence of a peaceful home, but the kind of emptiness that echoes, the kind that screams. Eleanor walked through the corridors of the mansion as if she were a visitor. Every piece of furniture seemed out of place. The long curtains, the family portraits, the oriental rugs she'd had shipped from Istanbul. It all seemed to belong to a life that no longer made sense. She entered Arthur's room, which he had kept locked since the accident, for the first time in months. The air was thick. The books were where he had left them. The papers with technical notes still rested on his desk. And on the bed, a small shirt folded neatly, as if someone was still going to wear it. Eleanor sat down slowly, looking around. Her hand caressed the bedsheet, as if expecting to find warmth. It was there that she cried, without restraint, without elegance, without armor. She hated herself for never having asked Arthur if there was someone, for never having noticed the signs. How was it possible that the most important person in her life had lived through something so intense, so transformative, and she hadn't known? Leah's words came back to her like a repeating whisper. "He was afraid of your reaction." How many times had she reinforced that fear with her actions, with curt phrases, with the expectation of a perfect son? She wanted the best for Arthur, But had she deep down molded a son to fit her plans, and not his own life? That night, sitting on the edge of his bed, Eleanor picked up an old wooden box from the back of the closet. Inside were letters, drafts of ideas, childhood photos, and among the papers, a small envelope with her name handwritten on it. Arthur's handwriting. She hesitated. The letter was unfinished, just a few lines beginning with, "Mom, if you're ever reading this, it's because time betrayed me." Eleanor read it aloud, her eyes flooded with tears. The paper trembled in her fingers. He had wanted to tell her. He had tried, but he couldn't. She held the letter to her chest and murmured, "You tried, and I didn't see it." The next day, Eleanor returned to the cemetery, not to hide, but to be present. Truly, she brought a small bouquet of flowers, this time sunflowers, Arthur's favorite as a child, and a simple gift, a box of colorful building blocks, like the ones he used to play with. She sat on the stone bench, the gift beside her, and waited. It didn't take long. Leah appeared, holding Ben's hand. When he saw her, he hesitated, but didn't run away. The boy ran ahead, and upon seeing the colorful box, broke into a smile. "Is that for me?" Eleanor looked down, holding back tears, and nodded. "If you want it. Your father loved playing with these." Ben immediately sat on the ground and started building clumsy towers. Leah remained standing, watching the scene with cautious eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked in a low voice. "Because I'm tired of running from the truth," Eleanor replied, "and maybe from myself." Leah nodded. She didn't respond, but she didn't leave either. They sat down, side by side. The silence between them was heavy, but also full of possibilities. Ben stacked blocks and, without looking up, said, "My daddy lives in heaven, but I like it when you're here, lady." Eleanor smiled, holding back tears. "I like being here too, Ben." Leah automatically corrected him gently. "It's Ben. He likes to be called Ben." Eleanor stored the name in her heart, like a key. When they left, Eleanor stayed, and for the first time she approached the headstone not as a grieving mother, but as someone carrying the beginning of a second chance. She touched the cold marble and whispered, "I saw your son, Arthur. He's beautiful, and he looks just like you." That night, alone in the library, Eleanor picked up the letter again. She read and reread it, and she thought that maybe if he'd had more time, Arthur would have told her everything. He would have shown her the side of his life she never saw. She wanted to continue. She wanted to know more. And above all, she wanted to be a part of it. But there was something she still didn't know. Something Leah had never told her. Something Arthur had taken with him on that last night. And what Eleanor was about to discover would change everything once more. Have you ever had to deal with a truth that arrived too late? One of those that changes everything, even the way you see who you used to be. If you have, just type yes in the comments below, just so I know you understand. And if this story has touched your heart in any way, stay with me, because what comes next is even more powerful. The following week, Eleanor decided she would no longer watch from a distance. She arrived at the cemetery early, but this time she didn't hide behind the trees or wait on a bench. She stood tall, next to Arthur's headstone, her eyes fixed on the stone path where Leah and Ben always appeared. The wind blew gently, as if clearing away the weight of the previous days. Something in her chest still ached, but it was different. It was no longer a paralyzing grief. It was a restlessness, like someone who needs to take the first step, without knowing where it will lead. A few minutes later they appeared. Leah wore the same worn-out coat, her hair in a simple bun, her gaze always watchful. Ben skipped alongside her, carrying a small, folded piece of paper. Upon seeing Eleanor standing there, the boy smiled. "It's the block lady," he shouted, pointing. "She came back!" Eleanor smiled back, this time without holding back. Leah stopped. She took a deep breath. Her eyes said it all. Surprise, caution, and a timid hope she barely let show. "Good morning," Eleanor said calmly. "Good morning," Leah replied, approaching slowly, never letting go of her son's hand. Ben ran to the headstone, knelt and placed the paper on the marble with the utmost care. "Today, I drew the sky," he said. Because Mommy said the sky has colors too. It's not just white. Eleanor knelt beside him. Can I see? The boy handed her the paper. It was an explosion of colors. A blue sky with yellow dots, orange stars, and in the center, 3 figures. A child, a man with wings, and a woman holding a balloon. In the corner, a word written with great effort. Famee. Eleanor felt the lump in her throat tighten. Do you like to draw? She asked. I do. Daddy liked it too. Mommy said he was good with thinking things, but also with pretty things. Leah looked away, visibly moved. He was, very, Eleanor replied. Ben ran off to play with pebbles among the graves. The 2 women stood there side by side in silence. He called me Ben, Leah said suddenly. Arthur was the one who chose the nickname. He said it was stronger, less predictable. Eleanor smiled through teary eyes. He hated the predictable. Leah finally turned to her. There was no accusation in her face, no declared resentment. There was weariness. There was pain. But there was also something new, willingness. I don't know what you want from all this, Eleanor, but I'm here. I have nothing to hide. I just ask you not to come into Ben's life just to leave again. He's already lost his father, and I don't know if I can watch him lose anyone else. The words were spoken firmly, not as a threat, but as a shield. Leah knew what it was to protect a child. Eleanor remained serene. I'm not leaving. Not now. Not after all this. If he is a part of my son, then he is a part of me too. Leah nodded, but she didn't smile. Not yet. It was too soon for that. That day, for the first time, they walked together to the cemetery exit. Ben was between them, jumping on the dry leaves. At the gate, Eleanor turned to Leah and said, I'd like to invite you for lunch, not today, whenever you think it's time. Leah hesitated. He doesn't understand who you are yet. That's okay. Maybe I don't understand either, but I want to try. Ben looked up, curious. Lunch where? In a place with big windows and good food, Eleanor answered, smiling. The boy smiled back. Is there dessert? If you want some, there is. He then held Leah's hand tightly and said, Okay, Mommy, I like her. The sentence caught them both off guard. Leah squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold back tears. Eleanor smiled, touched by something she couldn't name. That night, back home, Eleanor found one of Arthur's old sketchbooks. On one of the pages, hastily scribbled, was a small sketch, a robot with childlike features and a name written beside it, Ben. She ran her fingers over the paper and whispered, You already knew. You just didn't have time. And for the first time since Arthur's death, she felt something new blossoming. It wasn't joy, nor relief. It was simply a will to continue. The invitation was accepted a week later. No date, no formal commitment. Just a simple text message on Eleanor's phone from Leah. Ben asked when we're having lunch at the house with the big windows. If you still want to, we can come on Saturday. Eleanor read the message 5 times before replying. Of course, I'll be waiting for you, with dessert. Saturday dawned with a shy sun, and for the first time in a long while, the mansion seemed to have a purpose. The staff was given the day off. The table was set delicately, with fresh flowers chosen by Eleanor, and in the kitchen, a carrot cake with chocolate frosting, a recipe Arthur adored. When Leah and Ben arrived, she felt her heart race in a way that not even meetings with investors could cause. Ben ran in, his curious eyes scanning the stained glass windows and hallways. Is all this yours? He asked without ceremony. It was. Now maybe it's a little bit yours too, Eleanor replied spontaneously, surprising even herself. Leah smiled discreetly. She still had the look of someone who checks the ground before stepping, but she was there, present, whole. Lunch was quiet, though permeated by careful silences. Eleanor still measured her words, Leah, her gestures. But Ben, oblivious to any adult tension, broke down all barriers with his vibrant innocence. After dessert, he asked to draw. Eleanor brought paper and colored pencils. He sat on the floor and, in silence, began to create. A few minutes later, he held out the drawing to Eleanor. "It's you, me, and Mommy, 3 little hearts together, but the one in the middle is my dad's. He's inside us now, right?" Eleanor felt something she couldn't name. She just nodded and stroked his hair. As they were leaving, Ben hugged his grandmother tightly. "Grandma Eleanor, will you be here next time?" She froze for a second. Leah's eyes widened in surprise. It was the first time the boy had called her that. Yes, Ben, whenever you want me to be," he smiled, and ran off toward the gate. Leah said nothing at that moment. She just followed her son with calm steps. But before getting into the car, she turned and said in a firm voice, "He gets attached quickly, just be sure of what you're doing." Eleanor nodded. "I am." In the days that followed, Eleanor told no one. Not the press, not the board, not her distant relatives. It was as if this new bond needed silence to breathe. She started visiting Ben and Leah at their small apartment in a simple building in a tree-lined neighborhood. She brought books, toys, sweets. Sometimes she just listened. Other times she told stories about Arthur, the ones she never thought were important, until now. One evening, upon returning home, she found an envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Inside, just an old black-and-white photo of Arthur and Leah together. They were both laughing, unaware they were being photographed. He was holding a makeshift bouquet of wildflowers. She was looking at him with an expression of pure trust. On the back, written in Arthur's hand, "If the world finds out, let it be for love." Eleanor pressed the photo to her chest. The image felt as heavy as a request he never had time to make, but now it was hers, and hers alone, to fulfill or not. That night, she dreamed of Arthur. He watched her from a distance, among shadows, saying nothing, just smiling, a light smile, free, as he had never been in life. She woke up in tears. She knew what she had to do. She just didn't know if she would have the courage. Days later, sitting across from Leah, she finally said it. "I want to do something public, official. Introduce Ben. Say who he is. Acknowledge him." Leah was silent. I understand the weight of that," she said calmly. "But we're doing okay like this, Eleanor. He doesn't need fame. He needs stability, affection, and I want to give him that. With my name, with everything. I want him to know one day that he was never a mistake, that he has a place." Leah looked away, touched. "Then you need to know everything before you take that step." Eleanor frowned. "Everything?" Leah nodded, her eyes welling up. She took a deep breath, and then she said, "I never told you what it was like. That night, the last one, when he said goodbye to us, and what she was about to reveal, Eleanor would never forget." Leah's apartment was quiet, welcoming. Sheer curtains let the late afternoon light filter in softly, and the smell of cake baking in the oven mixed with the distant sound of a cartoon in the living room, where Ben was engrossed with pencils and paper. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, her elbows propped up, her hands clasped. She waited. Leah's sentence still hung in the air. "I never told you what it was like. That night, the last one, when he said goodbye to us." Leah stood motionless by the window. She took a deep breath, as if she needed to draw courage from the air itself. "Arthur got here late in the afternoon, on the day of the accident," she began, without looking at Eleanor. "He was lighter than I had ever seen him. He brought me flowers from the corner market, something simple, but with that way he had of apologizing without saying, 'I'm sorry.'" Eleanor remained silent, just listening. "We spent the afternoon on the living room floor playing with Ben. He did the voices for the characters. He laughed so much," Leah's voice broke. "He seemed like a different man, younger, freer." She turned around. "He told me he had made a decision, that the next day he was going to your house. He was going to tell you everything, about me, about Ben. He was going to face whatever he had to, but he didn't want to hide anything anymore." Eleanor felt her stomach sink. It confirmed everything she had feared, that the truth had been so close and had slipped away by a hair's breadth. "He told me he loved you," Leah continued. Even with the expectations, the pressure that sometimes felt suffocating, he said he understood the weight you carried, but that he wanted to live his own truth too. She stopped, looking Eleanor in the eyes. And before he left, he knelt in front of Ben. He hugged him so tight and he said, "If one day I don't come back, I want you to know that Daddy tried, that he loved you even before you existed." Eleanor brought a hand to her mouth. The tears came, hot and untamable. "He left that night with the letter in his backpack, the one you found. He was going to give it to you the next day." Leah paused. Except there was no next day. They were silent for long seconds. Only the sound of Ben's laughter from the living room filled the space with a painful sweetness. "Why did you never tell me this before?" Eleanor asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Because I didn't know if it was fair. I didn't know if you were ready to hear it." Leah hesitated. "And because for a long time I was angry too, at everything, at the world, at you. But then all that was left was exhaustion." Eleanor nodded slowly. This was more than a revelation. It was a crossing. She stood up from the chair, wiped her eyes and walked into the living room. Ben looked up at her with a wide smile and showed her the drawing he was making. "Look, Grandma, it's Daddy with wings. He's watching over us from heaven." Eleanor knelt, took the drawing in her hands and took a deep breath. "And you, Ben, do you know who this is?" she asked, pointing to one of the figures. "That's you. You're with us now." That night, Eleanor made her decision. 3 days later, the headquarters of the Sinclair Foundation was packed. Employees, press, investors and partners were attending the company's annual social responsibility event. As always, Eleanor took the stage with impeccable posture. But this time her speech was different. "For many years," she began, "I have spoken here about innovation, legacy and impact. But today, I want to talk about something I never learned how to measure: love." The audience fell silent. "My son, Arthur, left this world far too soon, and for a long time I thought I had lost him completely. But recently I discovered he left something precious behind. A son, my grandson, a boy named Ben," murmurs, wide eyes. "And that is why today I'm officially recognizing this boy as part of our history, our name and our future." The screen behind her lit up. An image of Ben appeared, smiling, holding a castle made of colorful blocks. "This is the first of many stories we will tell together, not of perfection, but of truth." Timid applause gradually grew. Eleanor didn't waver. For the first time, she was whole, unafraid of judgment. As she left the stage, Leah was waiting for her backstage, holding Ben. He was clapping enthusiastically, not understanding the weight of it all, but happy. Eleanor held out her arms, and the boy jumped into her lap. "Grandma, you talked about me on TV," he yelled. "Am I famous now?" Eleanor laughed. "You always were, but now the world knows." Leah smiled, her eyes glistening, and in that moment, in the narrow hallway behind the stage, with warm lights and distant voices, Eleanor felt a certainty grow in her chest. She had done the right thing, not out of obligation, not for her image, but for love. A love that even in silence had survived time. Eleanor Sinclair's announcement reverberated like thunder through the market, on social media, and even in the most private corridors of her own empire. The morning after the event, the phones at the Sinclair Foundation headquarters wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews, shareholders demanded explanations, and competitors whispered behind the scenes. But the biggest impact came from within the company itself. Early that morning, the board called an emergency meeting to discuss the new reality. In the conference room, the faces were grim. Some were in disbelief, others visibly uncomfortable. The chief executive, Charles Hayes, who had worked alongside Eleanor for years, opened the session. "I confess, the news caught us by surprise. Publicly acknowledging a grandson outside of our planned context, it could create instability." Eleanor remained calm, looking at each of them. Instability is living a lie. Today, we are a company that preaches social responsibility and ethics. Let's be consistent with that. The discussion went on for hours. Some members raised concerns about inheritance, power, and the potential damage to the brand's image. Others, less vocal, seemed touched by their CEO's sincerity. Among them, Ann Peterson, the Director of Human Resources, spoke softly, "I think this action brings humanity to our work. For us, who deal with people every day." Outside, the buzz didn't die down. Journalists dug deep into Leah and Ben's story. They uncovered the young mother's modest background, her struggles to raise her son alone, and the quiet love she had shared with Arthur. Social media was divided. There was harsh criticism, accusations that Eleanor had been an absent mother, that Arthur had lived a double life, and that it was a broken family. But there was also massive support from people touched by Eleanor's courage and the story of redemption. People who had lost children, who had hidden parts of their own lives, and who found a mirror in the narrative. At the Sinclair headquarters, Eleanor felt the weight of the criticism and the suspicious looks. But she also saw the glimmer of hope. One day in her office, she received an unexpected visitor. Arthur's grandmother, Mrs. Celia Sinclair, an elegant and reserved woman, entered with slow steps. "Eleanor," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I need to apologize to you." Surprised, Eleanor listened. "I didn't know how to be a mother to my own child. I planned too much, demanded too much. I didn't see that he needed to be free to choose." Mrs. Sinclair held Eleanor's hands. "Thank you for giving him, and now Ben, the chance that I couldn't." In that moment, Eleanor realized that the real change wasn't in what the world was saying, but in what her own family was beginning to feel. Time passed and the media frenzy faded, making way for what truly mattered. Eleanor offered Leah a position of trust at the Sinclair Foundation, focusing on social projects for young mothers and children in vulnerable situations. Leah accepted with pride and determination. Ben began to visit the mansion regularly, gradually winning a place in the hearts of the staff and in the once silent corridors. He would laugh loudly when Eleanor read stories to him, sometimes with funny voices, other times with all the tenderness the world could offer. One day, during a meeting, Eleanor received a phone call. On the other end of the line, a firm voice. "We want to congratulate you on your courage and the example you are setting for the business world." It was one of the largest international associations of business leaders. They were inviting her to speak about humanized leadership and social innovation. Eleanor accepted. Alongside Leah and Ben, she took the stage months later, telling the story few could have imagined. She spoke about loss, secrets, and the power of love to transform realities. In the audience, emotional faces recognized themselves in her words. And it was there, in that instant, that Eleanor understood. She was no longer alone. Her story now belonged to everyone, a story that united past, present, and future, and that, despite the difficulties, proved that love, courage, and truth could rebuild even the most broken of families. Eleanor came to understand that true love is not made only of grand gestures or eloquent words, but above all, of the willingness to listen, to welcome, and to learn with every step. The past, no matter how painful, should not be a prison but a bridge to rebuilding. She understood that it was not enough to be powerful in the business world. She needed to be vulnerable before those she loved. The rigidity that had protected her from grief had slowly become a wall that prevented her from living fully. Forgiveness, she discovered, was not just a generous act toward others, but mainly a gift one gives to oneself, a path to free the soul. The relationship with Leah and Ben was not a replacement for what was lost, but the creation of a new story, a story where love and truth were the only certainties. And above all, Eleanor learned that time does not heal all wounds, but the courage to face the pain can transform it into strength. On that path, she found not only her son and her grandson, but herself, whole, imperfect, human. The most valuable lesson Eleanor carried with her was simple: the love that cannot be seen, that cannot be touched, but that remains alive in silence and memory, has the power to change destinies. The months that followed were of deep, albeit quiet, transformations. Eleanor's mansion, once cold and empty, slowly came to life. Children's laughter began to echo through the halls. Colourful toys appeared in the once immaculate spaces. Ben, with his contagious energy, became the link that brought warmth and movement to that home. Leah went back to school, driven by the support of the foundation Eleanor had helped strengthen. Between books and social projects, she discovered a strength she never knew she had, turning her personal struggle into an inspiration for other young women and single mothers. Eleanor, in turn, learned to share command of her life. She understood that leadership is also about yielding space, embracing imperfections, and accepting the unexpected. In her weekly meetings with Leah and Ben, she rediscovered the meaning of what she called family, not a perfect place, but a space of love, respect, and learning. In the market, Eleanor and her grandson's story inspired a new corporate culture, more human and connected to people. Social inclusion projects gained strength and results, proving that true innovation lies in empathy. As for Ben, he grew up surrounded by affection and possibilities. Between stories of his father's childhood, simple gifts, and constant hugs, he built roots that once seemed impossible for him. The press, which had once sought a scandal, now celebrated a transformation, not of a cold billionaire, but of a woman who dared to love despite her fear. And although the past would never be forgotten, Eleanor had found peace. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Her greatest victory was this: love rebuilt with tears, courage, and the certainty that some stories never end, they just begin again. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button to show it made a difference for you. Tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I want to know where these stories are coming from. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos that show the transformative power of love and courage. And before you go, click on one of the stories I've left on the screen now and come with me to the next video. Let's experience these emotions together.